Psychedelic drugs are a class of drugs which are known to cause what is referred to as a psychedelic experience. These psychedelic experiences involve visual and auditory changes, often referred to as hallucinations, an altered state of consciousness, which is changing the way your thoughts work inside your mind. Common psychedelic drugs include psilocybin, which is the active ingredient in magic mushrooms, LSD, mescaline, which is the active ingredient in peyote cacti, and DMT. So the way these drugs work is that they are agonists at a serotonin receptor in your brain, which is called the 5-HT2A serotonin receptors. These are the receptors which normally take up serotonin. Well, these chemicals mimic serotonin because they're closely related to serotonin. If you look at a molecule for psilocybin and LSD and mescaline and DMT, they're extremely similar to the serotonin molecule. So these psychedelic drugs can be classified in two main categories. There are tryptamines, which are psilocybin, DMT, and there's phenethylamines, which are mescaline and 2CB. There's also a third category, which was historically grouped into the tryptamine category, although it's debatable. It depends on who you ask, is if they're part of tryptamines or they're their own category, which is the lysergamides, which include LSD and LSA. LSA is an active ingredient in morning glory, which is a natural occurring plant. So one interesting psychedelic is DMT. DMT is found in the human body. It is found in, I believe, all mammals, and I believe almost every plant contains this drug. The DMT experience is marketed remarkably different than, let's say, an LSD or a psilocybin experience because of its intensity and short duration. People can smoke smoke DMT. They're instantly transported to what is described as an alien world with intense visuals. People often report seeing pyramids, flashing colors, seeing aliens, insectoids, angels contacting them and talking to them as if they are separate entities. Whereas with LSD and psilocybin, it's a much less intense trip, although they can be intense, especially at high doses. So there's a lot of misconceptions about these kinds of drugs. People often think of these drugs as something silly or something fun that hippies do to have fun or just to get messed up, which is not exactly accurate. And that could be a dangerous thing too, because when you think of a psychedelic as a fun thing to do, like it's smoking weed or drinking alcohol, you can be underestimating the power of them. Even at low doses, they can be quite powerful and they can result in a bad trip. And the thing about bad trips, it's kind of a misnomer. What a bad trip is, and what all trips are, in the mind sense, is what happens is with psychedelics, they remove these filters in your brain, which are holding back subconscious thoughts. And this is scientifically accurate, what I'm saying now, because they've done research on this. For example, on LSD, there are new neural pathways open up in the brain. Parts of the brain start communicating that don't usually communicate with each other. So because of that, subconscious thought is often brought to the forefront of your mind, and you are forced to think about it. So if you have problems, if you have issues that you have been repressing, these drugs will make you think about it because you have to face these issues, and you have basically no choice. You can't fight it. And fighting it is often what people do and result in a bad trip. The psilocybin wants you to think about these issues. It's trying to help you, is how I would describe it. Because of this, they're doing research currently for using psychedelics in therapy for people with depression or people who have terminal illnesses like cancer. So, for example, they gave psilocybin to cancer patients who are near death, and they come out of these experiences completely changed with a new outlook, a positive outlook, and their fear of death completely gone. And it's because on these experiences they describe a feeling of oneness with the universe, or a oneness with God, or a oneness with every living thing and every person and everything on the earth and everything. And they get this intense feeling that the universe is a cycle. Everything in the universe is a cycle. Life and death is a cycle. Dying is simply part of the cycle. So they become okay with the idea of dying. They understand that everyone dies, everything comes and goes, and that death is simply part of the cycle, and they come to accept that. Other effects experienced on a psychedelic experience, of course, I spoke about confronting issues that you have in your mind, and this is especially important for people with depression or PTSD or anxiety and mood disorders of that nature. Feelings and issues that they suppress are brought up, and this is especially valuable in a therapeutic setting. So, in my opinion, these drugs should be legal, not only for medical purposes, but for any purpose, because, first of all, we should have the right to use any substances that we want. The government should not have the authority to come and say, well, this is a bad thing in our opinion, so you can't have it. And the science doesn't back up their claims half the time. They say that LSD and psilocybin, along with cannabis and MDMA, have a high potential for abuse. It is not true, because these are less addictive than alcohol and nicotine, when alcohol and nicotine are very much legal. You cannot overdose on these drugs. You can overdose on MDMA because it's a slightly different drug. It's in the amphetamine class, so you have to be careful with that one. But it's still safer than alcohol. There are way less deaths reported with MDMA, and addiction potential for MDMA is way less than for alcohol. So it's complete BS that they are in Schedule 1 of the United States Controlled Substances Act, and they are banned in other countries as well, usually in the most strict category, along with heroin. They think that it's as addictive as heroin, when they're not. They're not as dangerous as heroin. Heroin will kill you. Withdrawals from heroin will kill you. You don't get withdrawals from psilocybin. There's no withdrawals. In fact, the tolerance for these psychedelic drugs builds so fast that if you took LSD one day, and say you took 100 micrograms, you have a trip, and then the next day you take 100 micrograms again, you most likely won't even feel it. You need to take at least, in my opinion, 2 weeks before taking it. But often people who take these drugs don't even feel like doing it again after 2 weeks. Usually, if they're a fan of psychedelics, they will take these drugs maybe a few times a year. which is what I recommend. It's a few times a year, maybe even once a year, and it's sort of like a cleanse. Especially if you have issues that you need to think about, you need to confront, that your ego is suppressing. A lot of people describe what is called an ego death on psychedelic drugs. So the ego is what we use as a filter to filter out what we don't want to think about, um, filter out our weaknesses, and just not confront them and put on this mask. The ego is a mask. Psychedelics make you take this mask off and make you act and feel and think how you truly are. And that's where the therapeutic benefit of them comes in. So there are many theories on these drugs. So one theory which I believe is that people often refer to this theory as the stoned ape theory. It's actually not a theory, it's a hypothesis. The theory has been tested and proven. So this stoned ape hypothesis says that back in the past, in our ancient history, early humans or early hominids discovered these naturally occurring psychedelics and hallucinogens, ingested them, and it had an influence on our thinking skills, our thinking abilities, and the ways we think about the universe and religion. And in my opinion, particularly Eastern religion, was very much influenced by ingesting psychedelic drugs. If you look at the art of, for example, Hindu art, Hindu paintings and such, um, they use patterns and designs that are very much similar to the visuals you get on, for example, psilocybin or other kinds of hallucinogens like DMT. They're extremely similar. Um, Native American religion as well, very similar psychedelic art in their ancient religious art. And in South America, DMT is used religiously in a spiritual context, um, through what is known as ayahuasca, or I'm probably butchering that, but ayahuasca, which is basically a tea that is brewed up with DMT containing plants and plants that contain an MAOI, which is an inhibitor, which basically allows the DMT to cross the blood brain barrier in your brain and feel the effects. Because orally DMT's it's ineffective, so you have to smoke it or take it with an MAOI orally, ingesting it. In Mexico, there are Mexico and other Central and South American areas, there are native groups that use psilocybin mushrooms, and they have been using them for possibly thousands of years. So to me, I think that psychedelics have had a tremendous influence on our history and our culture. Then there's another theory about DMT, which is that we aren't exactly sure what DMT is for in our body. We know it's there, we know it's produced in parts of our body. There's a popular theory, let me look up his name, I think it's Rick Strassman. Yeah, so Rick Strassman is a psychiatrist, he's a medical doctor, he's a psychiatrist, he works with DMT, he has this hypothesis, which is that DMT may be produced in the pineal gland in your brain. And why is that? So, dreams. We have no idea exactly what causes dreams, and a popular theory is that DMT may influence dreams. People often say that the DMT experience is very surreal and dreamlike, as well as other psychedelic drugs. Another theory that is related to that is the near-death experience phenomenon. There is a theory that, or a hypothesis, I should say, that at death, your brain releases a flood of DMT. And why is that? So death is a traumatic experience. And it could be our brains, our body's way, nature's way of calming us down and making us have a somewhat pleasant experience while we're dying. And I have had an experience on psilocybin mushrooms. And psilocybin is extremely chemically similar to DMT. They are related very closely. So I only took 2 grams of these mushrooms, although they were very strong, potent mushrooms. I was laying in my bed and I had my eyes wide open the whole time. I saw what I would describe as a near-death experience, although I wasn't dying. I saw a white light appear in front of me. All of a sudden, it felt like I was going through this tunnel of whiteness, and it was just shooting forward into this tunnel. I felt like I didn't feel my bed anymore, like there was nothing around me. But I did feel like I was being wrapped in a really warm blanket. I didn't have a blanket next to me. I felt very warm, felt very at peace. It was the most peaceful feeling I've ever felt. And I felt this feeling of love. And it's a very personal experience for me. To me, that was like the closest thing, what I would describe as coming in contact with God. I felt this presence, like something was with me the whole time. And I don't know how long, it felt like time was meaningless during this experience. I was just shooting through this white tunnel. I felt peace, felt warm. I felt like there was God with me. And I don't know how long time was meaningless. I looked, when it finally went away, it just kind of dissipated. I looked over and it had only been 5 minutes. But it felt like I was there for like several hours. It was very strange. It was very, very interesting. And that's why I think that these near-death experiences and similar experiences are caused by psychedelic chemicals. So in short, I'm going to wrap this up. These are a very important class of drugs that should not be stigmatized. They should be legal. They're relatively safe if you take the proper precautions. They need to be respected because they are very powerful. And they show potential. They show potential for therapy. They show potential for personal growth. And they're a very interesting thing to talk about. And they're very interesting experiences to have. And I think the tide right now is turning in their favor with all the research and the government finally loosening its grip and saying, okay, you can research this stuff, but be careful. Of course, you have to be careful. So in short, very interesting stuff. That's about all I have to say on that subject. Thanks for watching this whole thing. Thanks for making it through. And have a nice day.